running the line, day in, day out. Trucks moving cargo, transforming themselves into workhorses of profitability. But when these workhorses are sidelined due to damage, it's a direct hit on a company's bottom line, both in terms of transport time lost and the cost of repairs. And don't even mention replacement. It's cost prohibitive. That's why independent and corporate carriers turn to the solution in collision correction and wheel alignment, to B-Line. This video will highlight the B-Line equipment and methods you'll use to get trucks back to running the straight and narrow on the road to continued profitability.
We build 3 frame presses. This is a 36-foot press. We build a 28-foot press, and we build a 40-foot press. We build them in 2 styles. One with the holes through the press here, and that is for the old style diamond pull, and we also use that in Europe. In the United States, we don't have any holes in the press whatsoever anymore. We also build these presses in a 36 and 28 foot as a what we call a drive-over press. What we do, instead of the wheels coming out the back underneath the press, we have them coming out the front here. It lays down tight to the floor. We can now drive the truck over the top of it, then raise the truck up and put the runways in, and then go ahead and do a frame job the same way as we would now. On these presses that are used to put into the a drop floor or above the ground like this one is, we build them with ears on the end of the presses for tie downs, and that allows you to put what we call a 4-leg tie down system, which goes into the floor. You would have 2 tie downs in this position here in the center to tie the press to. Then you're going to have a tie down out here and a tie down out there. That's basically used for doing trailer work, because when you're doing a trailer, you have to lift the center of the trailer as well as you have to lift up on the side rails of the trailer, or you cannot camber it or arch it. So that's the reason for the turntables. Okay, on the end of the press, we have a air-over hydraulic pump, which allows us to raise or lower the press at any time that we want to, giving us the position we need to have underneath the truck or trailer. At that particular time, especially like when we're taking side sway and a twist out at the same time, we will end up raising it up and tying the press to it and then letting it down, as I'll show you in a little later. The other advantage we've got over anybody else, of course, is that we can take and remove our runways so we can walk right up to the press. So for instance, I'll take this runway out like this, and we can do it 2 ways. We can just set it right alongside the machine like this, and then we can take and remove this part right here by removing the latch, turning the runways right out of our way. In that position, we can raise this press up and down by putting our air pressure to our air-over hydraulic pump. When you press down on this part of the pump, it will pump. Now, underneath here, which is down under here, which may be hard for you to see, is 2 valves. The one on the right-hand side, on this side, is to raise the front of the press. That's this part here. The one on the left-hand side will raise the back of the press back there. So I'll open the one in the back because it will pump up slower, and I'll open it and I'll raise the back of the press, as you can see it coming up now. And when you get it to the height that you want, you can then stop, lock it in position. The height of that is, when it's clear down, is at 19 and a half inches from the floor up. On the one that you drive over, you're only about 10 inches from the floor. Then the height of it is 43.5 inches high. What it'll allow you to do is raise that up even underneath the trailer so that you can get the height you want. Once you get that way, then you can let it down or raise it. And that's the reason we have the pump on the end of it. Okay? I'm going to just lay that off to the side, and we'll explain some of the tooling that is in here before we get going any further. I will remove the runways so that I don't have to walk over the top of them. In most cases, if you are into a section that is not where a tie is, like I'll show you here, you're able to remove the leg as well as the runway. The reason we do that is to make it more accessible when we're doing the job. As you'll notice when we're going to do it with a truck on it, you'll get a better idea. Everything is worked or tied to what we call a stationary clevis. Everything is hooked to that. All the beams are hooked to it. All the tie downs are hooked to it. And that is all wedged underneath, as you'll see as we go at it. The ideal part of this press, compared to anybody else in the industry, is two things. There's probably more than two, but two things. One, that we can raise or lower the press to work at the height we need to work at on the vehicle we're working with, say a truck or a trailer. That's one thing nobody else can do. The other thing is everything that we're doing, as you'll see, is going to be at an absolute right angle to the truck. And as you, like on a pull type machine, like one that, like our B-liner, for instance, with the chains, when you go to pull on that frame, you grab a hold of that frame and you're pulling. Now you're pulling from this side, we'll say, for instance, and you have nothing to bring the other side along with it, unless you put a chain all the way around that, okay? Now, if you grab a hold of that rail like this with two clamps, what happens is the rail wants to open up like this if you're pulling it with a chain. With ours, with the knees, as you'll see, that are right angle, pushing this across, we're pushing that rail straight. So if the rail's tipped out like this, it'll push against here and straighten that rail right up, then push it right straight across like that. What this press will do, this machine will do, I should say, will save you time and does not make extra work by doing some damage that would not normally be in there from the wreck or the crash. We have telescoping rams which are right at this cross beam right here, which allows us, and they're 20-ton, which allows us to go up twice the distance on a 3 times the distance on a ram, which we can get way up here. Okay? The press is designed to roll back and forth on roll strips, which would normally be right here in the concrete. And so you can take the press and roll it back and forth like this. Got to remember it's heavy, so it takes a lot of weight. Everything we do on this press is going to be self-contained to the point where it can't come out and it can't hurt you. Our safety factor is absolutely fantastic. Also remember, every time that you have a pull-type unit on a truck machine and you're pulling with 3/8 or 7/8 chain, some of them are 1/2 inch, every time you go over a little sharp spot on that rail or anything, that chain will break. It's just like a slingshot. You don't have that problem here whatsoever. Okay? Now, Just go on back here, and we'll show you a few of the tools that we're going to be using, and I'll explain to you maybe some of the names on them. First, you got what we call, this is what they call a stationary clevis. You've got a yoke that goes underneath, or a clevis that goes underneath, I should say, and two plates on top. You get a clevis like this, two plates on top. Now, the notches in here are for the wedges, which we'll show you how to put them in later. One wedge will go this direction, the other wedge will come into this direction. And the wedges are the long wedges like this, the big gray wedges. You'll put one in this way and one in the other way. And when you're putting them in, you will hold one of them and drive on the other one. It will lock them both in position. The other thing that you got to remember when you're putting these on the machine, and you normally leave them on the machine, 4 of these come with the machine. If you've got a 36-foot machine, you might, and anybody who has a 36-foot machine, will probably like to have 2 more, because we've got a cross beam that goes right here in our press. So if you've got 2 of these stationed in this position in the front section, 2 in the middle section, and 2 in the back section, you don't have to move them. You've always got them there. Okay? So when you put them in there, you've got a bolt on this side and a pin on this side. Always put the pin to the inside. And the reason for that, it makes it easier to work, because all you have to do is put it underneath there, pick it up, drop these over. Now if you had the bolt to put in and you got a truck up there, you're reaching over the press like this to put that bolt in there. But because we've got a pin, which is a 1-inch pin, 1122 pin, all we have to do is pick it up, slip it in there, and we're all in position. And like I say, if you've got people out there who only have 4 of these instead of 6 like we have in this machine, you need to sell them 2 more. But these are made so that they can be slid any position you want. Okay? Now, everything is tied to this. Okay? In other words, if I have a beam here, I'm going to tie my beam to this. If I had to, for a tie down, for a twist, will be pinned to this with 1 1/4 inch pins. Everything goes to this safety or stationary clevis. This part of the unit is exactly the same if you're using all the machines we build as far as truck. For instance, if you were going to have a rail system like a trailer rail system, it has not the clevis that goes around the press, but it has a hook system that goes into the I-beam. But these pieces here on top are exactly the same. Then everything else works at exactly the same. Okay? Now, this piece here, which I'm going to put over here on the press, is for taking side sway out of it. And they're called a side roller. Okay? Now, don't try to pick this stuff up. I'm going to push this one out of the way so that you can see it easier. The biggest problem that everybody's got is they try to manhandle everything. I'm a small man and I've worked this machine all my life. Take this piece here. If you're going to pick it up, it's going to hurt your back. Why pick it up? All you have to do is grab a hold of it, roll it up like this, and now I can move that any place I want to, even to the point if it's under a truck. Now when I once get it into the position, all I have to do is turn it sidewards, and it's in position. Had steel beams that I was working, I never take them off the press. I leave them right on there. But say, for instance, you do. Don't pick up them steel beams. Take them, walk them over to where you want to go with them. Okay? You can walk them any place you want to go without hurting your back. And that's the idea of this whole situation, is we're much safer than anybody else, and we don't have to lift any of this stuff. Okay? I'll back up over here. I'll lay it down with my foot on it so it doesn't slide away. Tip it up. Slide it onto the press. Okay? And now, I need to move, and I have a short beam. If we had a real long beam, it's a little bit heavier, but just take that beam and all you have to do is slide it over and walk it down the press, just like this. And I can walk it any place that I want to walk it with. And never pick that beam up. Okay? Now, these beams, no matter whether it's aluminum or steel, are going to have two series of holes. A series of holes on the top and a series of holes on the bottom. The series of holes on the bottom, if you'll notice, are right here close to the end. They are always used to tie down to the press. The tooling, other tooling, will tie to the top. Okay? So say, for instance, I want to go into that stationary clevis. I would move it in position, or approximately in position. I'd take my beam, and I'll slide it to wherever I want it. Tip it up. Move it around. Tip it till it falls in there. Slide it to whatever position I needed it to be. Find a pinhole, and I don't care which pin, where I pin it. Could be in any one of these holes. Now, if I was going to make it as a movable beam, like on a side sway, I need to be in that side roller. So again, here I am. I tip it up, move it over, tip it back down, onto my rollers, and I'm into position. There's two sizes of pins. As I mentioned to you a minute ago, the pin that went in here is an inch pin. Then you have an 1 1/4 pin. Both of them are approximately the same length. Okay? The 1-inch pins will fasten like clevises. They'll hold a piece in here that we're going to use, but these 1 1/4 will always be fastened to the piece that takes the most stress, like this connector or this beam. Now that we've got this so that we can roll it back and forth freely, and that's another feature that we have that no one else has got. With this being this free to roll back and forth like that, of course, as soon as we release our pressure, when we're doing a side sway or anything, the thing is allowed to roll the truck right back to the position it was before. And then we can recheck it. So now what we have to do is we have to put our plates on, which are like this, onto the unit so that we can put our knee to it. So we remove the nuts, and you will notice that we've got one bolt through this direction and one bolt through the other direction. We do that so it's easier to install. Take the both nuts off. I'll take one bolt out, put it in position. Take my knees, or my plates. Put one bolt in like that. Put the other plate on it. Put my nut on it, and just loosely Then I could pick the other two up, put my bolt in from the other side, like that. Start my nuts just loosely. And now I'll put my knee on in. And again, I'm using a steel knee, which is quite heavy. A little later, I'll show you the aluminum knees. Now, I drop this knee in there like this. Never, ever have the knee to where it's in that type of position where this part is over the end of the beam. What will happen is when the pressure comes against it, it'll push down, pushing the beam up into the knee here, and pulls this hole right open on a real heavy push. So now what we do is we just slide this in, and again we can put that in any one of the holes. Here's the difference in the two pieces. This is a steel knee, and this is aluminum knee. Okay? You can see the differences right here to give us more strength in this part of it and this part of it. But also, look at what I'm doing with that aluminum knee. Let me show you what I can do with this steel knee. And I'm not very strong. But let me tell you this, I'm not going to put it out there. There's no way. The difference in the two. Okay? The beams are the same way. Take, for instance, that 44-inch beam or 66-inch beam that we had a little trouble lifting before. That's the width, length of the beam. It's that easy. It's that easy. They're hot. They're as strong as the steel. Anytime that you're coating a machine, coat it with aluminum knees and beams anymore. People will be happier. The other thing is, if you're trying to get somebody into that, the knees will interchange with everything we've done. For instance, I'll show you how we're doing it, and I'll crawl in there on that one beam right here that we've got here close together. Let's see. Let me get this knee just so you can see what I'm talking about. As long as you're not going through a roller, all you have to do is, here's a steel beam. Come on. Okay? Here's our knee. Going to pin in the same position as the steel one did. Exactly the same. If you've got an old shop, okay, my suggestion, sell them the knees first, because that's the part that you got to get into the tight spot, and the mechanic's in a hell of a position. So if you sell him the knees first, and he gets that going, then eventually he'll buy the beams. But most of these guys won't go out and give you the order for the whole set at one time. So sell knees first, beams second. Remember, when he's trying to get into a spot, he can put it in there. Very easy. This knee can be used either direction. It can be used this direction or this direction of all the knees. Say, for instance, I put the knee into this position and pinned it. You'll see what I'm talking about. We're clear over the edge here. Even if I turned it around and put it in there, which is the way you'd be using it, your stress is coming off here, and here's your problem right here. Now, normally when we find that problem, it's because this beam has been turned upside down, and most of the holes are on the top rather than on the bottom. So you got to watch that. Okay? Now I'll go ahead and I'll put this back in here and pin it. The reason that you put these bolts in the opposite direction is you have a shank on these bolts, and I'll take one out so that you can see what I'm talking about. You have a shank on the bolt right here, okay? So when you got one bolt in one way, it's on the shank for this plate. When you have the bolt in the other way, you have the shank for the plate on the back. So you always have the plates laying on those shanks, and it doesn't allow the plates to be shifted like this. So the pins will always go through it correctly. And you don't have to fight them and beat on them with a hammer. Okay, now once I've got this done, there's two ways that we can move this beam across. Okay? And if you want to, if you get into the position where you had a very long side sway, where you needed to double up, what you will do, or can do, is you can take our yoke, jack yoke like this, and put it in on this side, which is adjustable, and pin it in there. And I'm going to pin it in here a little ways, and it pins right through these holes with a 1-inch pin, like that. Now, one thing you got to watch is don't get the pins all the way in, but be sure they're through right here. If you get them all the way in, sometimes they'll hit on the bottom of this plate and cause it to stop. Okay? Then what I always do, there's a couple of ways of doing it. Some people take the break-off part of the caster shim and they place it right in here, because this will swivel right in here to make this lay straight. I have the habit of putting a block of wood under it like this. And the only reason you do that is so that this is going to push straight here at all times. Okay? So now what I got to do is get a plate and a ram holder. So I'll go over here now, and I'll pick up my ram holder and a jack base. Now the reason we use this jack base is so that we can not be pushing right against the end of this beam here and crack our top. I'll take and slip this down here over the beam in place, and then I will tighten it in place. The ram holder is designed to go in two places. One it can place right there, or it can be placed on top of a beam like that, as I'll show you in the other way I push. In this position, I've got to look and see if I've got this fairly straight, and I'm just a wee high, so I'll back that down a little. Take either a long stroke or a short stroke ram. I place it in here, and I always place it in here with the ram head against the beam. The reason for that is it'll move out, and it won't make any difference to the movement on it. If you go the other way, you may have premature leakage on your rams. Okay? And I'll just pull it back till it's back into position like that. Now as I push that across, the ram will push this across like this, and it's going to take the side sway out of my truck. Now, if I got this over here, we'll say that far, and I run out of ram, and I need to go further, all I have to do is move this back and forth a little bit to wherever the pinhole, and I'll go around, because if I had a truck on there, you couldn't do this by reaching across the press. I would push it on out here, until my pinhole lined up and lock it in position. Now I can let off my ram on that side and move this part in like this and continue to push. Pull my 2 pins out here, push it in until I can line up to a pinhole again. Pin it back in position like that. And now I can push again till my ram runs out. Okay? Now, I got it pinned over there. The very thing that you got to watch, once that you do that, you got to be sure that you go back over to this side and remove that pin. Because if you don't, it's going to tie up and start bending things for you. Now, another way you can do this same thing, and because I have a short beam in there, I'm going to remove this. And say, for instance, I push this clear over here this far, and I want to go some more, or I need more pressure. I say I need 40 tons of pressure rather than 20 tons. What I will do is I'll go to the other side, and I will not only have a ram on this side, but I would be able to take my jack bait, fasten it onto here, and again, you can't have it like that. You got to have it so it sits down on the beam. Here I put my ram holder in there, and I place my ram again in the same way in here, and normally I try to get it so it's off of this collar so that it sits straight on without the collar in there. But now, as I push against it, and I'm going to lock this wedge in here, the back wedge I'm holding with my hand. The wedge is going into the front like this. I will then drive like this and hold the back one, and that locks both of them in at the same time. Okay? Now the side roller is held tight. Now as I push my ram here, it's going to pull this beam across, and of course I've got myself to the position here where I don't have any travel anymore because of the way I've got it set up. But it would pull it across just like that, just like it would with pushing on that side. But now you can have a 20-ton ram over there pushing, say a long stroke or a short stroke, and vice versa over here, and you can just continue to move this as long as you got a long enough beam all the way across this truck or trailer. Okay? That's your side roller or your side pusher. And a lot of times you may want to have 2 of these set up in the middle of a frame because you may have a real long bow, especially on a trailer frame, where you've got 2 pushing and a holder on each end. Okay? Now, what we'll do is we'll set up a holder, which is going to be basically the same thing, only it's going to be up here on the front so that we can hold the front or wherever we got to hold it. It doesn't need to be on the front of the truck, but wherever it's got to be held. We're going to put a holder here and a holder in the back. And then we're going to use this as a pusher. To give you an idea, this would be like a side sway, banana type side sway. In other words, the truck is pushed into this direction. So to correct that, of course, we're going to have to hold it right here, and we're going to have to hold it right here. But the setup that I just put is a pusher which we are going to put right in this position, and I'll call it a P, and we'll call the holders an H. Okay? Now, when we're putting a holder up, you got to remember that we don't have to hold it on the outside. We could hold it on the inside here and the inside here, as long as it is at a cross member. You can't have it with it not at a cross member. Okay? Now, sometimes, because we got an engine that sets in here like this, and we only got a real small cross member across here and two eyes here for the transmission bell housing, that if we wouldn't want to hold right in here because we might break this bell housing. This is normally an aluminum cross member in here, and if this front bumper up here is not on there, we would not necessarily want to hold right there either. And the reason for it is because we'll break that aluminum cross member. So we could come back here, and normally you'll have a transmission in here, and then you'll have a cross member back here. And of course, your cross members are always in the rear of your truck, and you'll have, and there may be more of them than really would be in there. But now you could come back here and hold here, or you could hold here or here, right at that cross member. And yet this part here is going to come around, because as you push this way, this is going to have the tendency to move around like this and not give you any trouble. Okay? Now we'll go ahead and I'll show you how we're going to set up those holders, and then later we'll show you on a truck. But I think it's easier for you to see it if I do it off the truck. The other thing you'll notice that we won't do right now, but when we get to do it on a truck, you must raise one of these tandems up off of the ground, because if you don't, they won't slide and you'll end up with what we call an S-bend. And I'm going to show you how to straighten that out. Again, we're going to have a holder here. That's the same as we've got here, isn't it? Okay? But now, if I'd put a holder here, in this position right here, it wouldn't do us any good if we're going to be pushing here, will it? So what I got to do now is I got to put a holder right here. Now I'm going to put a pusher. This is a holder, and this is a holder. This one here now will be a P, and right here will be a P, or a pusher. Now, when I'm straightening this part out, I'm going to put pressure here, and at that time this becomes a holder. I got a holder here and a holder here now, don't I? And a pusher here. Now when I want to straighten this part out, this will become a holder, and this becomes a pusher. But if I open this all up at the same time, and I'm pushing both directions like this, I'm putting this pressure against this holder, and this pressure against this holder, and I'll straighten it all out at one time. Now, if this one's coming too fast, I shut the valve down a little bit. If this one's coming not quite fast enough, I open the valve up a little bit so I get more oil going in until it comes around straight. Now, when we're doing this, to start right out, and I'm going to take and draw another one here and explain this while I'm at it, we've got our frame gauges in here like this, and when we go to push on this, on any one of these, we can push this over until all of these pointers line up in a line like this. Okay? If they don't line up in a line like that, we can stop. We have not corrected the problem until we go past the yield point. So if they don't line up, we don't have these in the correct position, whatever we got to do. Once we get them in the correct position, this is all going to line right up, right in the line. Now we can go past and relieve until it's straight. Okay? Let's go over and we'll put a holder up, and then we'll go from there. Say, for instance, I've got a hanger in my way here. I can put this, what we call bypass pusher on, or holder on there. Pins only to hold it up there. And now it's against the rail here. Then I can take a block of steel or two wedges one wedge this way, one wedge this way, until it's out against the frame. I can put it in that position. I can drop it down like this. I can drop it down like this for the adjustment. It can be used two ways. If you'll notice that this one here has got more distance from here to here than the bottom has from here to here on both sides. So in other words, when it's out tight here, you're going to be that approximately 2 inches away from the knee. If you're the other direction, you're going to be right out tight against the beam. Now, when you're pushing against the rail, you should have something like this going against the rail to keep the rail from getting damaged, or you put a jack base on here like this. What it does is just keeps this 1-inch steel from making a mark on the rail. That's all the reasoning for it whatsoever. Now, as you'll find out when we do this truck, we will have our side sway cradle, which is this part right here, which allows you to float back and forth freely this way, a ram in the center which will raise up the differential and will allow it to float back and forth freely this way. Now, in some cases you'll have a bell housing broke at the rear of the engine. You need to hold that up. You can use this in that position if you want to. I've even went to the point of raising this up if I want to take the tires and wheels off of a vehicle for some reason. If any of your shops do not have this and are doing truck work, they are fighting an S-bend all the time because of not holding that up at either front or rear differential up. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to show you an S-bend. We're going to set up the same way, and of course you can't do this like I'm showing you sitting over here with a truck on there, but nevertheless, so you got the idea. Again, we're putting a holder. If you'll notice, we're putting a holder on this side the same as we have our pusher up there. But we got a holder on the inside over here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come back up here and we're going to set up a side push. Now, you would put a setup very similar to this on that setup there. But now stop and think about it. I got this set up here that'll roll like this, won't it? Pushing against that knee up there. And when I'm pushing there, I'm pushing against this one that's held. But now this one will roll that way, pushing against that one, and now I'm taking the S-bend right out of that truck all at one time. A platform-type machine, you cannot do that. It's an impossibility. On this machine, I can take the side sway out of it, I can take an S-bend out of it, I can take a twist out of it, and I can take a sag out of it all at one time, all in one motion, by just controlling my rams. On a press-type or a platform-type machine, you cannot do that. It's an impossibility. Absolutely impossibility. Okay, what we're going to do now, because this is a basic setup, and you see how we've taken the runways on the stuff out, what we're going to do is we're going to break this down, and we're going to bring a truck up on here so that we can show you tie-downs and so on. I'm going to sit down here where I can run the valves, which again are underneath here, and I'm going to run this press clear down to the very bottom of the stroke. Whoop. Okay, now we'll say, for instance, we set up the tooling on the machine like that because we needed to get away from the objects that we had underneath the unit. So now what I do is I take with our 20-ton telescoping ram, which is right here in this position, I'm going to raise that clear up in as high a position as I can get it. Okay, I just made that back ram spit a little bit of oil out. That's what I was watching because I thought I was just about to the top right there. Now I'll go ahead and raise this front one up. And I'm just about to the maximum right now. And I really don't want to get oil all over everything, but whoop, right there. And if you watch your rams real close, you'll see the oil just squirt out a little bit, and that's your maximum height. Now, you can see what I'm talking about with these legs are almost straight up and down. From the top of the press to the floor is 45 inches. If we were using this as a drive-over system, we would have raised the vehicle up in the air with our press, just like we did here now. Then we would take runways that are fastened like this one is, except down here we have casters on it that are locked in casters with springs on it. We could roll that over here now, and we'd put one set of them under the front axle, and then two under the rear, one on each side of the tandems. Then when we let our press down, which I'll do now, we would allow the truck to come down onto the runways. And I'll stop about there. And now we can use the press exactly the way we've told you before. The advantage of it is you don't have to use any particular stall. You can put it outside. You can put it anywhere you want to. You can pick it up with a forklift, put it outside, use the floor for whatever. You don't have to worry about Yosam's situation where they put all the rails in the floor, which cost them about $100,000. And they say now you got a system that you can use the floor for anything you want to, but you still have the rails in the floor to fall over. With this system, you can just pick it up and put it outside. You can roll it outside, whatever you want to do. Okay? And that's a very good advantage for people who don't want to tie up one stall for just framework. What we're going to do before we start in on this truck is we're going to put a set of frame gauges on it. Now, this is the only set of frame gauges that are out on the market that are built this way. You move one pin in, the other one will come to exactly the same distance. The other thing is we've got an extension on it like this, which allows us to get it out on the outside of the truck so we can tell from the outside what we got in the frame. By having that, it also allows us to get this frame gauge up tighter against the bottom of the frame to get a more accurate reading. So when I go to put a set of frame gauges on, especially if I'm down in the middle of the truck, in the center of the truck, and hook it over the opposite side, I don't have to be right on top of it every time. And I can show you that a little better if you want to come over this way. I'll show you when I'm standing out here. There's four places you're going to want to put these frame gauges. One is you want to put one at the rear, and I'll move that one up ahead of this mud flap. Then you want one that'll be just ahead of the fifth wheel plate. And again, all I have to do is stretch it out like that, hook it up on the rail on that other side, hold on to it, push it across like this, and hook it on the other side, and I'm done. If you had the other type of frame machine gauges, which are called tape gauges, you would have had to immediately crawl in there and measure that all. Now we get one here, normally one right behind the cab or in this area, and one at the front. And that's where you'll set your frame gauges. When you are going on a truck, sometimes when you put the front gauge up in the front of the truck, where the rail, they have cut the rail away, okay? And so if you go to hang your frame gauge on there with your support rod on it like this, you are out against the springs, and that doesn't give you a good place to go to. So what we would do then is we'd go with what we call a web feeler, which is like this. And every shop should have that, even with their tandem aligner. Okay? And how you put it on is you turn the support rod crossways like this. Then you can put this bolt right through the hole and put the web feeler on there. And when you get that on there, if you haven't sold these already, you should be, or any shop that needs it should have them. Put them on there like that, tighten them in spot. That moves the frame gauge away from the frame by about 3 inches. On this particular truck, we don't have that problem, but it's something you got to remember and do. Okay? Set of frame gauges, you'll find a little piece that looks like this, and it's U-shaped, got little notches in it here. Many people don't know what that's for, but what it's for is sometimes when you put the frame gauge on, it'll have a tendency to cock up like that on that end like that because of the weight. So what you do is you put that right over the support rod like this, tighten this down on there, on the end that wants to raise up. Now the frame rail is right here, and it doesn't allow this to raise up and down. I'll put it on that one on the other side there, and you can see what I'm talking about. I pull that down like this, and then all I have to do is hook this onto the support rod like this, put it up tight underneath the frame rail like that, and tighten the thumb screw. And all it is for is to keep that frame gauge from raising up. Now the frame gauge can't raise up. Okay, that's all that's for. Fred's holding it right on the top of the front pin, and I'll bring it down here until it just touches the top of this pin here, and look up there at those other 2 pins and see what I've got. We've got very, very, very little side sway in that. Okay, what we've got here is a very slight side sway, which is right here in this area of right behind the cab area of maybe 1/4 of an inch. We got this tail end straightened out back here, and now what we're going to do is we got about 3/8 of an inch side sway in the unit. So what we've done is we put a holder up here on the back and right in the cross member area. The other thing is we'll put a block of steel right here on this bolt so that it won't give in. Then we've got it right in the center, we've got a side push. We'll put all the frame gauges on here with a holder in the front on this side also, and then we'll bring it across until all the frame gauges line up. Once they all line up, then we can go ahead and push and then let it off and see if we got it straight. Now, if I measure to the outside of this pin to the string, I'm approximately 1/4 of an inch off. So now what I'll do is I'll start putting pressure to that right here with the pusher, and the first thing I do is I start walking around before I get too much further and check and see that all my pins and wedges are tight and everything is safe before I go too far. This got a little pressure against it. Okay, and my blocks are all in place. Now I can go ahead and push. Okay, I'm right out to where I should be. If you can see, I put a mark right here on that beam. Now what I'll do is I'll go about a 1/2 inch past that position, and then I'll let it off. That way I know exactly how far I went each time. Okay, so I'll go about a 1/2 inch more, like that. I'll make a mark there again, and I'll let it off. I lost all my pins. Okay, now you see I didn't go far enough. I knew I didn't right away. Okay, now our blocks are in position again. I just come out to my first mark now, and now there's the second mark, and I'll go about a good inch past that on my second mark at least. Now it's starting to talk to me. That's the way I like to hear it. Boy, I like that ramp. Now we're setting up here to show you a diamond pull. This is the new style diamond pull that we're using. If you'll notice, we got aluminum knee here. If you're using an aluminum other than this pull ramp. Now this side over here, because as we pull this back, the rear of the truck has a tendency to come this way. The front of the truck is going to go the opposite direction. So we have a knee up here to keep it from coming this way, and on the front, on this same rail, we have a knee on the inside of the rail so it can't switch that way. Now, we have done it here where we put the knee at the end of the rail so the rail can't come back, or the truck cannot come back like this. If you had the front bumper off, you could put this on the front. It makes no difference. Now what we're going to show you is the flange tool. And the flange tool, when you're doing a side sway that's got a real bad side sway, which you've seen pictures where there's a big buckle in it, and the rail is laid clear over like this, you want to put your flange tool in there at the same time. This particular truck is straight up and down, so we don't have that problem. But I want to show you how it's able to go in between the knees. Okay, your flange tool is this piece here. Okay, what you do is you pick it up, slide it over your rail like that, and then you've got a long bar like this and two 1-inch pins. It goes on the inside. Put the top one in first, makes it easier. Put the second one in on the bottom. Now it can't come out of there. Now you got, usually on that flange press you end up with two plates like this. They're tapered off like this so that it fits in the curve of the rail. You'll put one in the bottom, inside. Normally you'll put one on top. The easiest way to do that is to get a pry bar and stick underneath here and pry it up. Once I got it in position, then what I'll do is I usually use two 30-ton rams, which are the ones that are this big around, this tall. That's 30, not 60. Okay, one goes on the bottom, like that. A plate on the bottom, in most cases, like that. And one on the inside. Between rails. And normally you will have to block it up with some blocking. I take this side sway out of this truck by pushing this beam across. If I had power on it, it's going to go right in between that flange tool. Now as that pushes it over, I will have the two rams opened at the same time. What it's going to do is crush the frame down like this at the same time as it's brought over this way. When you take and push the bubbles together that would be on the rail like this, you lengthen out the rail, you bring the height back up to about the same as it was, and normally within 1/8 of an inch. So now what you're doing with this machine that no one else can do is you're tying down the two high corners, which we'll show you a little later here. Let the weight of the press down on the machine, or on the truck, which will actually take the twist out of the truck. It doesn't take it out, it just makes it so there is not a twist. Now as you move it sidewards, the cross members reposition themselves, which takes the twist out of the truck, takes the side sway out of it, If you've got a sagged rail because it's buckled, we're taking the sag out of it. So we're taking a twist, side sway, and sag all out of that truck at one time.